This is Dennis Seatsma. My name's Dennis Seatsma. Dennis John Seatsma Productions, Homestead, Florida, USA. October 6th to Sunday, 2024. It's 2:58 in the afternoon. In this video production, I'm going to be telling you a story about my 1989 Baretta Success 200 boat. I bought it new, or my family did, and I eventually inherited it in 1989. Next segment. I got to tell you first, though, about my father, Thomas Bernard Seatsma, who was a good man and a good soul, and went to be with God in 2010. My father, my biological father, and he and I spent so many adventures on this boat, fishing from Miami to Key West. But before I tell you about that, I got to talk about the weather a little bit. My name's Dennis Seatsma. This is a video documentary. Recently, Hurricane Helene passed through several states, causing massive devastation and loss of life. And those places are still trying to recover. And I've been through several hurricanes and assisted with earthquake recovery. I didn't go to the earthquake recovery, but I provided logistical support from Miami with the earthquake in Haiti years ago. But I've been through Andrew and Wilma and Irma and more tropical storms than I can name over the years. And now we got Hurricane Milton coming, and at this date and time they're looking at landfall in the Tampa, St. Petersburg area, potentially. It could go anywhere though, and they're saying a Cat 3. Now back to the boat. This is a 20-foot boat, and I like it because it has this wonderful built-in swim platform, which is great for elderly and children and family. And my family was very young in 1989. I had two sons who have both grown to be very successful adults, and I can't say more about that. But this is a Baretta Success 200, and in 1997 I tore out the stringers and sole plate and replaced it with H80 Divinicel core, which is a better core than you could consider for a instead of organic, which holds water. H80 Divinicel and Blue Water 26 Cusa board both don't absorb water like organic wood plywood core does. Here in this environment, in this climate, I could only get 10 years no matter how well I encapsulated. And I rebuilt that engine box 3 times, or at least, yeah, 3 times I think, in the best marine grade plywood I could find, and thoroughly encapsulated it. But it would fall apart after 9.5, 10 years. That box there, I started building it in 2018. It's 2024 now, and no deterioration that I can see except a little blistering, a little gel coat work I got to do. And the rear seat supports are made out of Blue Water 26 Cusa board, which is 1/2 inch thickness. And the box, engine box, is built, and I've got a whole video series on the box. If you look on my playlist, you'll see. But anyway, more about my father, Thomas Bernard Seatsma, being a wonderful man and a wonderful, good soul who's gone to be in heaven. My father was born in Chicago to wonderful Dutch people, German and Dutch, in the Pullman area. On the south side of Chicago, around 101st Street or so. And my other grandparents were in Roseland, Illinois, on the south side of Chicago. My grandfather on my dad's side, he was a lithographer that helped defeat the Nazis in World War II, and in the fact that he was a map maker, highly skilled map maker during the war effort. And his contributions were so critical. He had 24/7 FBI protection during the years of the war when he was doing the map making in Chicago. They take the photographs from reconnaissance and rush them to Chicago where the maps were made. And my grandfather died at an early age, I think because of all the chemical exposure, and he died at 67 on my father's side, Thomas Bernard Sietsma Sr. And my other grandfather was in Roseland, Illinois, and a postal worker. And in 1968, the demographics changed in Roseland, and somebody started throwing rocks through his living room window and tried to set fire to his garage, not once, not twice, but 3 times. So he sold and got out of there as quickly as he could, and my whole family was about retirement age, and we all moved to Homestead, Florida in 1968. And my 2 great aunts on my mother's side moved to Leisure City. And yeah, so it was great. My whole family was here, and my dad worked for the phone company in Chicago in the central office in the Loop and Blue Island and south side of Chicago. And this is a documentary, not a how-to or fix your boat video. So, you know, my dad needed to get a job in Florida because we vacationed here in Fort Lauderdale all the time, or my family did back in the early 60s. And one night, 1967 New Year's Eve, he was in Hollywood, and the guy on the bar stool next to him say, "Why are you so sad?" And he says, "Well, I need a job in Florida." And he says, "What do you do?" He says, "I work on number 5 Crossbar in Chicago." And the guy's face lit up. He knew what number 5 Crossbar was because he was the top manager for the telephone company, which was Bell South or Southern Bell or whatever it was in 67, and offered my dad on the spot a job in Homestead. And he said it was hard for him to get experienced people to go to Homestead because it was a farm town. So my dad took the job. Well, next thing you know, all his friends, including his boss from Chicago, they all transferred to Homestead. So his staffing shortage was solved, and Chicago had a deficiency, but they could hire younger people to fill those troops. Anyway, my mom and dad met in the 3rd grade first, and didn't cross paths again. And my dad went to Pullman Tech as a VOTEC school and learned how to be a machinist and stuff. And then at age 19 was drafted. But my parents met again in high school, and my mother was drop dead gorgeous, movie star, beautiful in her 30s. And as a young girl, she was blossoming into a beautiful young woman, and they were quite enamored with each other. My father was a handsome man. Anyway, at 19 years old, he gets drafted, sent to Kentucky to learn how to fire a howitzer. Well, in elementary school, they thought my father was stupid because he couldn't learn. Well, he couldn't see the blackboard. They didn't test for vision, and it was only after they discovered he needed glasses did he excel academically. And with the howitzer, he was a genius. So they put him in the training department to teach other people, because back in the Korean War and World War II, you could fire a shell, but would it hit the mark? And computers were human, not, you know, they had some electromechanical devices and charts and tables, but basically you had to have a good person firing the gun if you hoped to do any damage to the enemy. Now, my father was sent to Korea, a very scared kid, 19 years old. He was a pacifist, and he was a student of Roman wars and other and he didn't want to be cannon fodder for some stupid war that the country wouldn't finish or had no benefit from that was lasting. So he didn't want to go, but he loved this country, and he wanted to serve, and he wanted to make his family proud, so he went. Well, there were a few sorties. A sniper's bullet zinged by his head, and he would, you know, I wouldn't be talking to you if it had hit its mark. But my dad survived that. But he came back with post-traumatic stress disorder because there was an attack upon his encampment while he was inside, and he wore glasses. And it was cold outside, so as soon as the enemy attacked, he exited the tent, and his glasses fogged up, and he fired at what he thought was enemy, and he never knew or could find out whether he hit friendly or enemy. He was sent there to kill the communists. That's what he was there for. And The spread of communism was the point in North and South Korea and in Vietnam, is to try, you know, but there is a plan now, present day, for one world order where we have one government and one leader. And if you study the work of Hitler and Goebbels, pure history and true history, you'll see they had the same idea, only they wanted Germany to be the leader, you know, and kill all the people that they thought were inferior genetically. So, what's the difference between the Illuminati, as they call it, for one world government, which you see in present day, that's the objective. If you study politics or religion, you'll, and I have, I don't say I understand either one, and the only thing I know about politics or religion is you really get people angry if you talk about either one. But anyway, that's why my dad was there, and he was guilty the rest of his life, and he had all kinds of nightmares until the day he died, that he might be responsible for hurting somebody other than enemy. But you know, his dad, my mom and dad had a kind of a rough marriage, in that my father was drinking heavily and would misbehave sometimes. Not enough to be thrown in jail, but enough to get my mother mad. And she had enough Scottish in her, and I don't know any Irish, but Scottish for sure, and Dutch, that she could get her dander up at my father. But my mother died at age 62, and my father lived on to be almost 83, and my father remarried. His second marriage was a lot smoother than his first one. He married an older woman, and they got along really well. But my father and mother fell in love at an early age as a teenager, going to the Tulip Festival in Holland, Michigan, and or someplace else in Michigan. They have every spring they have a tulip festival somewhere there, and I have a lot of family with the name Sietsma in the Midwest and Canada, and obviously Michigan, but I don't know any of them. And hello, if you say your name Sietsma, it's the way it's pronounced in Holland, I'm told, and my grandfather said my family's from Friesland, Holland. So anyway, back to the boat. My dad was suicidal after my mother died, and I begged him not to hurt himself. Dad, please don't. Please don't hurt yourself. Jesus said we must endure. And I didn't know that at the time to tell him that, but I begged him to endure. And I also told him about the psychological and psychiatric damage, and he had had enough mental health problems himself that he knew that he didn't want to hurt his grandkids or hurt anybody. He didn't want to hurt anybody else. He was a pacifist, but he was a good shot, and that he won marksmanship medals when he was in the Army. And he said he enjoyed being in the Army. He liked he had probably had some form of autism as well, and he was a genius in the telephone company in the central office. He knew number 5 switch bar, which is an advanced version of the Strowger in telephone relay. I'm an engineer, so I speak telephone language. I'm an electrical engineer. So anyway, Dad says, okay, I'm not going to kill myself. I'm going to buy a boat, and you're going to be the captain, me. So we started going on adventures into the Florida Keys, and I would scuba dive for lobsters. We would catch more fish on this 20-foot boat, but I had to keep it durable and reliable, and it's fallen into kind of disrepair here lately, but it's a real nice setup here. Plenty of room for a coffin box cooler, plenty of room for everything you need to go out in a day on the water, but yet it's not so big. And it's got this little 4-cylinder 3.7 liter Mercruiser in it that's very thrifty on fuel, and I've kept it all up and operational. Now, it's not been on the water, but I'm going to run it again today. I run the engine on muffs at least once a month or more often if I can. But the nice thing about, and I did all this work myself on the back, the nice thing is you can move these cushions and get a sun deck here in addition, and this box is really heavy now. I'm going to pause the camera for a minute. Next segment. This is my 3.7 liter Mercruiser I had rebuilt, I think around 2005, and it's got the Pertronix ignition. It doesn't have the purple resistance wire that burns up. It does have a purple wire, but there's no resistance in it. It has the 4-inch heat exchanger and the CDI electronics rectifier regulator and the original alternator stator. And I started a Facebook group called 3.7 liter Mercruiser that's very popular, and the focus is thrift and safe operation. As you see on the box, there's no deterioration of the Cusa board or the H80 Divina cell, which is 1 inch and the Cusa board is 1/2 inch, and I laminated them together, and I'm real happy with it, because now if I go scuba diving, I jump on it with 300, you know, I'm over 300 pounds between my weight and the scuba gear. I could jump on it and not be afraid of breaking it. And these seats in the rear are, this is the steadiest place in the boat if you don't want to be bounced around, is in the back. Most people like to ride though in the front when you're on plane, and this is a 40 mile-an-hour boat. Now I redid all of the wiring with marine grade wire a while ago, and I had the floor up, the deck, the sole plate, whatever you want to call it, I had that up to replace the fuel tank a few years ago, and put everything back together using the best materials I could find. And these bolsters are 1/2 inch expanded PVC, as all the plywood's been removed from all the upholstery and replaced with expanded 1/2 inch PVC. So I really like the layout of the boat. I'm real happy in its condition, but it's not been on the water for a few years because I didn't have a tow vehicle. My van was not working, and I just put a remanufactured engine in that from Powertrain Products. So I'm back in business with a tow vehicle, but I still have some work to do on that still. But I don't have any time. I won't be touching that or probably this boat until 2025. So thumbs up if you like anything in here. But back to my dad's story. My father, before he died, had a dream, and it was a recurring dream that bothered him, that he was going to remove me from the bounty of his estate, which was considerable by the time he died. And there were other heirs and influences on him, and he was just afraid that I would be swindled out of the bounty of his estate. And I told him, I said, listen, just be fair with the heirs. I don't need to be a pig. I worked for FAA for 42 years, and I did quite well with FAA. And my wife worked for Everglades National Park, and she worked for the Department of the Navy, and so, you know, between the two of us, we were comfortable. Not extravagantly comfortable, but you know, middle class type. And but my dad had a stroke, and after his strokes he fell under the influence of, well, he had an estate plan done because he was trying to prevent it. Well, under that, after the stroke, he fell under the influence of grifters, and next thing I know, $100,000 is missing. So I go to the police, and they say, well, what do you want us to do? And I go to the district attorney, and they say, well, you need to do something. So I went to an attorney and I filed for guardianship, and they set aside the estate plan. And next thing I know, my father had a different guardian. He died, and I was removed from the bounty of the estate. And for that reason, I can't buy a new boat. And I hope that the audience is benefiting. And I can't say that I suffered too much by being removed. I did. Psychological damage was terrible. And my father wrote some things, notes that I read that really hurt my feelings. What others had lied people had lied about me and caused my father to do what he did. And anyway, it changed me. I started reading the Bible more. I started going to church more. I started talking to people more. And I'm trying more and more to help people. And I hope my 3.7 Mercruiser group and my YouTube videos are a benefit to somebody. But what helped me the most was not going to psychologists and it was reading the self-help books and realize that we all have trials in life and blessings in life. And blessed be the name of the Lord. So I've had more blessings and trials, and I just thought the audience might like this story about my 1989 boat that I hope to actually get on the water and use it one day. But next we'll run the engine. Okay, before I run the engine, I wanted to show you how this can be made into a sun deck. And I know it's uneven, but those can be straightened out and they sit fine. I forgot to mention I had boat outfitters fabricate, these were originally teak. I had them fabricate these out of hardened starboard. Yeah, starboard. And that makes it extraordinarily durable, but I wish I'd had it done in white instead of black. But I didn't. I was thinking that, you know, when fishing for mahi-mahi, the blood gets everywhere, so I thought black would be easier to keep clean than white, but it doesn't really match the interior. And next we'll run the engine. But as to the probate thing, Florida courts are really corrupt, and I would have fought in probate for my inheritance, but I didn't think I was going to win. I think it would have been a gamble, and I would have lost because of corruption in the I mean, when you study the characters involved in South Florida politics and South Florida probate court, they're right out of a Carl Hiaasen novel. And if you are a fan of Carl Hiaasen, and he's very woke, I'm not a big fan, but anyway, he's a good author. He wrote the book Striptease, and the movie came out with Demi Moore and Burt Reynolds. Anyway, all of the safety equipment I got to go through before we go out on the water and make sure everything works. But I just don't have time. I've been so busy working on that Astrovan, and I have a lot more to do. I got to pull a windshield out and put it back in and go from there. Do the body work myself. So, audience, that's the story of my 1989 boat, and thanks for watching. Before I conclude this documentary about my 20-foot boat, it would be remiss if I didn't run the engine and explain how I do it on muffs as often as I can. And I do it as often as I can because every time you run the engine, you lubricate it internally. Turn on the water, number one on muffs. Don't forget. I always forget. And then I burn up my impeller. Ugh. Then I have already done this off camera, but check your oil, number one. Make sure you haven't leaked it out through a rusted out oil pan or something. If you suspect any coolant leak, stop what you're doing, take out all 4 spark plugs, get a 3/4 inch socket and a ratchet, and carefully turn it through by hand and watch the spark plug holes for water if you suspect any problems with your engine, especially if it doesn't crank properly. Now, I have a switch here where I have battery 1 or both batteries or 2. I just found out number 2 is weak and old. So, number 2 I need a replacement. Number 3 is not that old. And number 1 is a Group 27 battery. Number 2 is a Group 24. And this engine only needs like 450 cold cranking amps. So either one's fine. With the water on, you turn on the key and you make sure you have voltage. And if you don't, you have to exercise the switch, the kill switch. So you turn it on, and I did not have voltage until I exercised the switch. So I turned the key and it would start, and it would kill as soon as I released, as soon as it went to start. But after I exercised the kill switch a few times, I got the voltage. So it tells me I got voltage. Now watch your tachometer, that'll tell you if you got spark when you're cranking. You see, I do have spark, and that was the audio alarm for low oil pressure. And we got pretty good oil pressure, it's about 50. Now you want to make sure that that you put it into drive and neutral and reverse, because you want to stir the oil in the stern drive every time you run the engine, and you want to make sure that the drive's not locked up, because you put it in gear, it'll kill out. Now if it kills out when you put it in gear, disconnect the white wire with the green tracer to temporarily disable the easy shift, and that'll tell you if you got a problem with the easy shift. This one doesn't have a problem, but I can't hold the camera and operate the boat at the same time, so I'm talking instead of doing it. Anyway, I'm going to pause the camera, get this engine running. This one's a little cold-natured because I got the electric choke disabled. I've got it adjusted fully open. But I run it around 1500 RPM on mops, or maybe 1000 RPM. Let it run for a while, let the oil circulate real nice. And when the engine's warmed up, then I can put it into gear without it killing out. And make sure you exercise the steering. Make sure the steering doesn't lock up on you. Not too much, just enough to make sure it doesn't freeze up. And keep your car steering pumped with oil in it and lubricate everything. And I like using corrosion preventative as much as possible. Next segment. Wait a minute, I'm gonna show you how it shifts. This one's got the Generation 2 controls and cables. This is a Quicksilver Commander 4000, MVC 4000, Generation 2, with Generation 2 cables. And I rebuilt the carburetor myself. It's got the brass float kit in it. And you always adjust the idle with the boat in the water. See, it just went into gear real nice. It's in gear. And back to neutral. And into reverse. Now the electrical system, the OEM, original equipment, is real fragile. Don't run weak discharge batteries or failing batteries. So number 2 battery's going bye-bye quick. But number 1's keeping it healthy when they're both. But the way you find out is you go start it with number 1, start it with number 2. So anyway, this concludes the documentary for today. Like I said at the beginning, I think it's October 6th, 2024. And the probate thing, if you have any wealthy relatives and you're an heir, make sure they do a trust. A estate will is no good. An estate plan is no good. A crooked judge can laugh at those, but a trust is a whole different kettle of fish. And my father was advised to do a trust by a fine attorney who did his estate plan, and he just flat refused. I don't think he understood the difference that you can avoid probate by having a trust, and that's what Burt Reynolds did. And everybody's, oh, he took his kid out of his will. Well, he did a trust. It was actually better. Anyway, anybody that's an heir or has any friends with wealth, tell them to get a trust. And it's more of a hassle with a lawyer, but you know, it keeps the corruption to a minimum. Hope you enjoyed my video. Give me a thumbs up if you do. Dennis Seitzman, Dennis John Seitzman Productions, Homestead, Florida, USA.